Welcome to the Big Book Roundtable of the RICO 12 family of recovery resources targeted at people from all backgrounds, faiths, and places dealing with addictions of all varieties. I'm grateful to be the host. I'm Justin B. From Spokane, and I am a child of an all-powerful and all-loving God and a multidisciplinary addict living in miraculous recovery, and I'm blessed to be the moderator of this roundtable, sitting around this thing from all over North America with David G. and Nikki M. The three of us are living this miracle of recovery one day at a time. And let's get into introducing ourselves. David, why don't you start us off, and then we'll go over to Nikki after you're done introducing yourself.
Absolutely, Justin. Thank you for your service, brother, as always. My name is David G. I'm an alcoholic addict of many sorts from Oklahoma, and really, really grateful to be at the round table today. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Nikki, you're up.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nikki M., and I'm a really grateful member. And as Justin said, I'm enjoying the miracles of this program. And not only the three of us are, but I had a grand sponsee come over today, and she had a little baby in her belly. And I remember when I first met her, she was dying. She wanted a baby and a husband, and she has it. So we're not only enjoying these miracles, but other people are out there too. Stay with us, everybody.
Love it. Thanks for sharing that miracle, Nikki. That's a really, really cool. And that's really the purpose of recovery, is to connect with a power greater than ourselves who does for us those things that we could not do for ourselves. And I call those miracles. So what we're going to do today is we're going to dive back into chapter 4 of the Big Book. We Agnostics is where we're at. We're at the top of page 47, and we will be reading through the end of that first paragraph on page 48, and then we'll be diving through, sharing some experience, strength, and hope. We'll be analyzing a little bit of what we read and just sharing some takeaways that we have on this. So let's get right into the reading. When, therefore, we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. This applies, too, to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. At the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth, to effect our first conscious relation with God as we understood Him. Afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. That was growth, but if we wished to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So we used our own conception, however limited it was. We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say that he does believe, or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. And we've got an asterisk that takes us to the spiritual experience, and we discussed the spiritual experience in the episode that released on May 24th of 2024. So you can definitely go back and check that out again, but I'm going to continue reading now. That was great news to us, for we had assumed we could not make any use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith, which seemed difficult to believe. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did we all say, I wish I had what that man has. I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes. But I cannot accept as surely true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him. So it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. Besides a seeming inability to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. Many of us had been so touchy that even casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were. So we've got a lot in there, and I'm excited to dive into this and see what jumped out at each of you as we read through this. David, why don't we start off with you? What are some of the things that you pull out of our reading today?
Well, thank you, Justin. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And it's always good to be around the table with you and our sister Nikki here, the prettiest girl in the room. And we are at a part of the work that is vitally important for each of us. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous in 1994, I could not stand that they talked about God. I could not stand that they prayed after the end of each meeting. It just wore me down. I just made me sick to my stomach. Because I think somewhere along the way through the years, I had lost the power, obviously, to do anything about anything. Myself, like many others, went through a lot of trauma during childhood. And I can remember praying when I was little for relief and for help, and it never came, or it didn't seem as if it did. And so I turned away from this, and I just hated the word God and Jesus and Holy Spirit and, favorable Son and all of the prayer and meditation. And when I got here, I went through this work pretty quick, a few different times, got some relief, got sober, but I still couldn't buy into the God idea, like the book talks about. But after 25 years and hitting an emotional bottom at Alcoholics Anonymous, I come back through this work in 2019 in a new way that I had never been before. And in fact, I've been able to bring this message to many, many people who have never been through it this way before. And we talked in the last episode about one of the exercises in this chapter being on page 46. And if you missed that, you can go back and listen. I don't want to recap on it today. But the next one, and probably the most important one for me in this part of the book, is right here on page 47. I have templates on that. If anyone wants, I can have Justin put those in the show notes and get them to you. But here's an exercise that was done with me that I do with everybody that I take through this work. Top of 47, when therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception. This applies to the other spiritual expressions you find in the book. And here's the exercise. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. And so at that point, the man had me to stop. I had a notebook. He had me draw a line right down the middle, column on the left, column on the right. And on the left, I needed to prayerfully look at any prejudice I had against spiritual terms and list them on that side of the page. On the other side of the page, yes, I was asked to list what these mean to me. Now, this was a hell of an exercise because obviously I had a lot of trouble with Christianity through the years. I really did. And I hated that. I just hated it. So absolutely, the term Jesus Christ, God, Holy Spirit, favorite Son, the cross, prayer, meditation, all of this stuff came up. And I began to list that on the left-hand side of that page. Now, if you look at the bottom of page 46, it's going to also give us some other conceptions if you're having problems. One is creative intelligence. The other is spirit of the universe, new power, God. See, those are all terms. It doesn't matter what you call this power. It's a term. If the term God does not suit you, find another term. There's the term power, source, spirit, creator. There's many terms for the same thing. And see, I didn't know this. The way I was raised in religion, it was one way, and this was the only way. And if that wasn't the way you did it, then your ass was going to burn in hell for the rest of your life. And I just couldn't accept that concept. And so when I listed Jesus Christ, I had to go look at what does this really mean to me. And one of the things that came up for me during that is I was always told that he was whipped and he was beaten and he was killed and that it was my fault. And they wasn't only talking to me, they were talking to the whole congregation, but I could not accept that. I just said, that's bullshit. I wasn't around. I didn't have anything to do with it. It doesn't matter. It was you. and for your sins and all this. And so I just couldn't accept that. So I felt like I had turned away from this, like it talks about. When I done this exercise, a hell of a thing, something miraculous happened. As I started going through each one of those and prayerfully listing what these really mean to me, I think I talked about it in the last episode, but I began to see that the people that were teaching me and telling me these things were pretty wounded in a lot of areas of their lives still. Some were sex addicts, some were alcoholics, definitely alcoholics, drug addicts, people who with good intentions were teaching me the wrong thing. And I felt like that's the way it had to be or else. So what I learned was that conception was their conception. It didn't have to be mine. And man, what a relief that brought on. I remember walking away from that, and at first I was arrogant, and I was like, I don't have to listen to that crap. I'm never doing it again, yada, yada. And here's what happened. I began to read and study with a new set of eyes and a different conception about Christ. And everything I read, it was love. I'm gentle. I am humble. I'm this. I'm that. How the hell? I mean, I have children. You guys have children, obviously. And God forbid one of them walk out on the playground or as an adult walk out, kill a half a dozen people. I would hate for that to happen. But would I hurt him? Would I burn him? Would I punish him? What would I do to him? I mean, I would want him to own up to his mistakes, but I would love him. No matter what, I would love him. And I began to see this. And as this grew more and more in me, what you read next is exactly what happened to me. At the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth, to affect our first conscious relation with God as we understood him, not as we understand him. Because if I understand something, I'm done. What I understood and what I understand are two completely different things. Afterwards, after the spiritual experience, here's what happened to me. We found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. And I can tell you today, that is exactly the faith that I practice. I'm a Christian. If anybody doesn't like that, say a prayer, get with your sponsor. There's a column you can write. I'd love for you to pray for me. But by God, that's my story, and that's just the way it is. I went from somebody who would absolutely beat you down in a jail cell if you talked about that to somebody that would read and pray with you. That's a hell of a difference in my life, because it says it seemed entirely out of reach. Notice the word seem. Where does that come from? That comes from the ego. That comes from the self. It tells me you'll never be able to reach this. If we wish to grow, there should be a question mark there. Then we got to begin somewhere. So we use our own conception, however limited it was. We need to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe? Hell, the agnostic believes. He's always believed. He's just never been able to apply the power of belief. Or am I even willing to believe? That's the atheist. If he is even willing to believe that there is a power greater than self, then we emphatically assure him he's on his way. He might not be there yet. Hell, it's a promise. I'm on the bus. I ain't going anywhere yet, but I'm on the bus. And that's a hell of a lot better than it was. So I love this. It's been repeatedly proven among us that up on the simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. And that's what we're looking for. Because if you miss this, I can promise you somewhere up the steps, self is going to come back in a different way. It's going to come back through remorse, jealousy, worry, bad relationship, making bad decisions. You're thinking, hell, I worked the steps. Why can't I get sober? I've done this over and over with sex addiction, over and over and over and over. So once this cornerstone was set in place, and I'm not saying my experience is everybody's is different, but I can tell you without this spiritual terms exercise, I would have never been able to see the beliefs that I had, hold them up to the light and say, does these serve me anymore? And be able to let the ones go that didn't and hang on to the ones that did. And man, it has changed my life. I don't no longer struggle about the term God or the term devil or the term heaven or the term hell. I have many beliefs on that stuff today. I believe heaven is the place we're at, same way with hell. So, God, this is such a powerful part of the book. That last sentence on the long paragraph there, it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. And so handicapped by obstinacy, that's just fixed ideas. Sensitive, that's easily upset. Notice the word antagonism, that's hostile opposition. Look, it says this sort of thinking, key word right there, words. This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. Once that thinking is abandoned, something new comes in to take its place. It says, we found no great difficulty casting aside such, key word right here, feelings. Remember, self is made up of ideas, concepts, beliefs, conceptions, feelings. It says, faced with alcoholic or sexaholic or loveaholic, whatever it is, destruction. Pretty soon we're going to become open-minded on spiritual matters. In this respect, whatever it is was the great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness, and that's the first step in this book. Sometimes this was a tedious process. For me, it was about 52 years long. I hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as I was. This is a beautiful, beautiful outline. Don't miss it. Thank you.
David, I love how you walked us through that, and I really appreciate that. I do have a question for you when we get to that point. But first, let's hear a little bit about Nikki's experience, strength, and hope as we read through this.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm just so grateful to be here. And David, you do. Again, I always say it, David doesn't know he's my sponsor, but he is. And I hope all of you out there are knowing that he's your sponsor too. So here we go. Where David started, I hated the word God too. When I first went through, I haven't done another set of steps. So when I first went through the Big Book with my sponsor, where it said God, I had to cross it out and put power. I had to put power because, no one comes in here, in my experience, looking for God. I come in here how to stop doing what I'm doing because I can't stop. So I don't want God. I have no place in that because religion has failed me. That's the human aid that's failed me. It's also on my resentment list. All these things I have against it. So I love where it says my own conception of God. And so, what I do? I loan my conception of God. And I love the exercise, David, is because you've told us this. I can't remember when it was on a previous recording or maybe personally about this exercise. So I have that whole thing, the columns and spiritual terms. What do they mean to me? But I skip all that. You're a little more thorough than me and I'm lazy. I'm just going to say, here's your conception of God. And I'm going to ask them, can they accept it? If I ask you, can you accept this conception if God is love? And then most people are so desperate because remember, we've gone through there. We've qualified them. They've qualified themselves. We're desperate. I'm desperate. So yes, I'll accept anything that this person in front of me has that I want. So love. And then with love, okay, your own conception, because I'm going to loan this to you sponsees out there. It's love, humility, polite, acceptance, forgiveness, patient, courteous, accountable, kindness. Can you accept that right now as the power that we're going to touch? And most people don't argue with it. And I love the promise, that there's so many promises on this page too. It says, we found ourselves accepting many things that seemed entirely out of reach. I mean, that's a radical promise. That's coming true for me a lot right now in year 12. I'm accepting many things that I never thought I could accept. That's, not just about God. Everyone's like, this is a life instruction book. So yes, we have to, once we accept these things, go even deeper, everybody. Are you accepting many things that seem entirely out of reach? Like here, I thought I couldn't be retired, and I am, and I'm only 50. That's entirely out of reach in 2024. How'd that happen for me? There you go. It says right here, I began somewhere with my own conception. And thank God I come from a lineage where I don't have to think too much. I'm real lazy. So they just, here's what this power looks like. Can you accept it? And a lot of the time it's an acronym for me, grow or die. Can you accept that, sponsee? Can you accept that acronym? Because you'll hear it in the rooms, group of drunks and all that's not strong enough. How about if I just tell you like this, you better grow or die. That's what we're talking about. And so when I love this too, you have to just ask yourself, not your mommy, not your daddy, not even me. Ask yourself, do you now, this minute, believe, are you willing? That's all. You have to have a willingness here. This is what's so cool about it. There's not much you have to do. And this next promise is awesome. And David said it, it's been repeatedly proven. Those are facts over and over again, that on the simple cornerstone, what cornerstone? This willingness. Just go back. Just this willingness to believe on that simple cornerstone. You can build a spiritual structure, not a religious people. We're not looking for religion here. We're looking for spiritual. And, my little note says, I've taken step 2. I'm on my way with this willingness to believe that this power can restore me to sanity. And, the next paragraph, I have the same thing, starred, highlighting, because it's comforting to know that it's this simple. That's comforting. Because I've been programmed into believing something else. So on page 48, I love this one. I'm handicapped. And I always ask my sponsees, what does handicap mean to you? Like no eyes, no legs, not being able to walk. What is it? Because the book is calling obstinacy. And I love David's definitions. I have being inflexible, being stubborn, being sensitive, having prejudice, being a judger, because I know better. I like to play God. And they talk about it right here. This thinking, and it's a key word, abandon. This is radical stuff. I don't get to think like that anymore. And so I love where it says here, faced with alcoholism destruction, because as David said, it can be anything. And this is the disease of alcoholism, destruction. I have to be open-minded. And then not just on spiritual matters, I had to be open-minded recently on things like worldly matters, because it goes further than this. Dive deeper with your sponsees. If you've been here for a long time, go deeper. You have to be real open-minded on all matters. Remember, we turn all things over, not just some things. And it's even on other questions. I just love this book. And it is a tedious process, everybody. My line out says there, this is not an overnight matter. So if you're coming in here going, what are David, Nikki, and Justin B talking about? Well, David's been here 3 decades. Do the math. Justin and I are here a little over a full decade. And we're not going anywhere. I can speak for myself and Justin. I know that. I'll die. So it is a tedious process. It's not an overnight matter. This takes time. It can be very monotonous, but the rewards, because I start to wake up slowly here. And then what happens? Exactly what David just said. It took a long time, 52 years for him. I don't want you to remain in everlasting ignorance. As we did do the speaker tape on the spiritual experience. And it says the only thing that can keep us, what does it say? Let me just get there real quick if I can find it. There is a principle. Here's the principle, which is bar against none. And it will keep us in everlasting ignorance is contempt prior to investigation. So I need to stay right here. I need to keep an open mind and have willingness and grow, or I'll die.
Thank you, Nikki. I've got a couple questions here. Let's start off with David. David, that concept that you're talking about, that those people's conception of God, who taught you, who you heard the way that they spoke of God as a kid, as a young person, does not have to be your own. How do you put yourself in a mindset, or how do you go about that process of relearning or being re-educated on those old ideas through a new set of lenses? What is the process you go to prepare yourself to do that?
Well, like it says here, faced with alcoholic destruction, we pretty soon become open-minded on these things. And that's exactly what happened to me. But what I began to realize is the people who taught me the things that they taught me when I was young about God had not had an awakening. Now, they had a lot of knowledge about God. They had some experiences, I'm sure, with God, but there's a difference between an experience and an awakening. And so for me, once I got to this point, I had tried pretty much everything that I had ever been told to do in the program through the Big Book. And it was unbelievable that I was still reading it with a sleepy mind. My life should have shown that by the way that I was behaving. Now, you would have never seen it because, I kept all that in the dark. But as with all things, what's hidden in the dark always comes to the light. And that's exactly what happened. But there's a verse that I love very much, and it says, you can't put new wine in an old skin. And the reason why is because it'll burst. And if you metaphorically look at that, that's talking about ideas. You can't really take new ideas and put into an old experience. I have people call me all the time and say, David, I have a sponsor and I have sponsees, but I want to go through this work the way that you go through this work. And I just tell them, I love you, brother, but I can't help you. And they're like, why? Why can you not help me? And I say, it's very simple. For one thing, you're coming over here wanting a new experience, but you're going to try to continue to teach the old experience to the people you work with. That doesn't work, brother. I can't give you a new experience based on old behaviors that you're going to continue to practice. And so I guess, not to go too far around the question that you asked, I'm very open to new ideas today, provided that they're firmly grounded in fact with what lines up in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the other things that I read. I put myself in a place for that because I'm excited to learn new things when it comes to being able to transmit the message to others. One of the things that I've always had, either sick or better, is the simplicity of how to share the Big Book. I've always had that. That's been a gift. So anything that I hear that's new. And another thing is, for the longest time, I always thought that this was all God. It had nothing to do with me. And I would hear that. You didn't do any of this. This is all God. And there's a story that I heard one time, and I'll wrap this up quickly so we can move on. But there was a young couple who bought a home out in the country, and it was ragged out. Weeds had grown up, roof was falling in, and slowly, they began to rebuild. They had it looking good, very nice. Well, this old couple was observing them each week. They'd go to church and they'd come back, and this place was looking better. Finally, the old man looked to his wife and he said, I'm going to stop and talk to those people for just a second. And so he stopped and he introduced himself and he looked around and he said, my God, he said, can you believe what God has done? And the young man looked at him and said, yeah, but you should have seen what he done when he had it a year ago all by himself. And that's kind of how I was. I always thought that it was just God. But without my willingness, there's going to be nothing there. So don't sell yourself short on anything in here. The story is, and we say it in the essay all the time, without God, I can't. Without me, he won't. And that's just the way it is. And with that mindset, I'm open to any new ideas. So thanks for your question, Justin. I don't even know if I got to it or not, but thank you.
No, I think where you got to, and you did cover it very well, but I think where you got to was very powerful. Thank you for sharing that, David. Nikki, question I have for you is, you talked about, you ask your sponsees when you get to this point, we often find ourselves handicapped, and you ask them what that means to them. What is the power behind admitting being handicapped by my own old ways of thinking, my own limiting attitudes that block me off from a higher power? Why is it important to admit that?
Well, because your life's not working. It's important to admit it because, see, right, we're on page 48 right now. So we've gone through all these other 47 pages to show that you have no choice here. You're dying. You're going to die. So this sensitivity, and we see it in the rooms, well, don't talk about God. You're going to scare the newcomer, Nikki. Well, we need to scare the newcomer because a lot of people aren't making it right now. and the other night someone prayed us out with the Lord's Prayer, and because we were like freestyling at a in-person meeting that we do, my home group, and it's like, who wants to pray us out? And it was all filled with Jesus this, Jesus that, and it was great. And right in the book it says, anybody with religious affiliations, don't be offended here. So if you are, maybe this isn't the room for you. So I really have to bring out this sensitivity and this handicap to show them you have nowhere else to go. Your doctors did not work for you. Your change of location from Orange County, California, Nikki, to Toronto, Canada didn't work for you. Oh, Nikki, your baby, how you had a son 12 years later, that didn't work for you after you had a daughter. So I have to show them these things because that's what the book says, show, don't tell. So I have to show them that this handicap of being so sensitive when someone looks at you and says, you're dying, this isn't working for you, look at you. And I think, David says he has a gift, and I know he does for bringing this book alive and for parables. Like you said, you're just like Jesus over there talking in parables. And I love that story you told. You answered the question, sir. It's like, I gotta change that for me too, because that's wonderful. I can't do anything without God. And that visual was so great. And so I have to show that to my sponsees. And that's why in when I sponsor, we have a, log and loser list, and that's the human aid list and all the things that you've lost. So it's right there in an 8 by 10, 8 by 11 white paper in black and white, what you've lost. So this sensitivity, it's going to kill you. I hope that answers the question, because why is it important for them to know? Because really, it says in the final analysis, I mean, we're nowhere else here. Where are you going to go? You can go back to, I just had a sponsor today. He's at CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. And he's gone back on these things. And that's great. I'm not a doctor, but I had to ask him, did you really try a spiritual mode of living? Because our book says it's the most powerful health restorative. Did you really search fearlessly for God? And I have to be able to say these things, because if they're sensitive, where that leads us, to death or insanity. I wish I had a parable like David did.
Very well. Very good. Very good. Thank you for sharing those things. Let's kind of go into our takeaways on this. And I'm going to start off with my takeaway, and then we'll go from there. My takeaway was, David, when you said spiritual knowledge is not the same thing as a spiritual awakening, that really hit me right between the eyes, that no matter what I'm seeking, if I'm just seeking for knowledge so that I can, spout off, whatever chapter, verse, page, and line, and whatever, if that's what I'm seeking, it's not going to be enough. But if I'm seeking that awakening, that knowledge then comes alive and isn't just a checkbox thing. And that's something that really hit me today. Thank you for sharing that. David, what's a takeaway you had from our conversation and reading today?
Well, I think, what you read and what we both shared on, and especially Nikki, is that even though it seems entirely out of reach, it is not. No matter what we've been told, you can't get to God unless you do this, unless you do that. The only thing that I need to do here is become willing to get rid of old ideas. Can't put the new wine in an old skin. You just can't. I mean, I've tried. I know. Hell, if it worked, I'd still be doing it, but it don't work. So my takeaway is this. That was growth, but if you wish to grow, you got to begin somewhere. So use your own conception, however limited it was. What a hell of a concept. Wow. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Nikki, how about you? What's a takeaway that you have from our conversation and reading?
Well, much like you, Justin B. David, who's my sponsor, I keep saying it and he doesn't know it. Sleepy mind. When he said that, it was like, yeah, that's what this is. Everyone's got a sleepy mind. So when he said this, because a lot of people will come to me and I get a lot of requests for sponsorship. Nikki, can you sponsor me? And then they go out and they don't sponsor the way I have just shown them, right? They go back to their old habits. So when David said this, I can't give you a new experience with your old habits. And that's what a lot of people come here and do. They want to have this new experience with old habits, and they just stop drinking. That's not going to work. And you just stop going to the massage parlor. You just stop eating sugar. You have to turn over all things. So I can't, if you want me to sponsor you, if anyone's listening and they know me, I can't give you a new experience with old habits. And thank you for reminding me of that, David, to stand tall and just say no. Go figure it out some other way. Because, I can't save the whole world or can't sponsor the whole world. And that's another reality that I really have to accept. Love you guys.
Man, what a beautiful episode, and so much fire that I'm getting here. Everybody, come in with an open mind, willingness, and honesty, and be willing to change and be changed, so that this new information can really sink in and make a new creature, a new person, a new child of a powerful, all-loving, all-powerful God out of you. Because dang it, you're worth it. You are worth it.